Welcome everyone to the Tomorrow Foundation's presentation for our summer community science project, which is Edmonton's private urban forest. This presentation and project is supported by the Alberta Real Estate Foundation, the Alberta Eco Trust, and Shrubscriber. So tonight's agenda will include introductions, an introduction to our pilot area, information about the Tomorrow Foundation, information about tree benefits, as well as information about tree identification. We will then wrap up and then have time for questions. So here's the core team. So as you can see, there's me with the beautiful flower hat. So I'm Elizabeth Sitko. I'm the Vice President of the Tomorrow Foundation, and I'm the lead organizer of this project. Beside me is Sandra Garrity, and she is the Secretary of the Tomorrow Foundation. She is also the leader of the Air Quality Project, which she will talk about later. Next, we have Diana Staley. She's an environmental economist, as well as last but not least is Barbara Sander, who is a biologist who teaches at MacEwan University. So why did we choose the Queen Alexandra area? Well, why? One is it's a mature neighborhood. And as a mature neighborhood, as we increase densification, this means the older buildings as well as the older trees are getting replaced. And we're quite curious about what does densification mean for our private urban forest? So by gathering data, we hope to get answers about that. One of the other reasons is the Queen Alexandra neighborhood has one of our air quality monitors in it. And we're very curious about how trees and air quality affect one another. And so by gathering data in the same area, we were hoping to see kind of what happens. We're just a very curious bunch at the Tomorrow Foundation. So some definitions. So there's Edmonton's public urban forest. So these are trees on public property and it's city owned. So these include trees in the river valley, trees in parks, and boulevard trees. So for Queen Alexandra, we have a little map of the public boulevard trees and it's by size. So the blue is the oldest and most mature trees. The yellow is the second oldest trees, and the red are the newest trees in the neighborhood. And as you can see, there are boulevard trees, which are we have this very blue section here. And then there are areas that has some of the newer trees. And it includes things like tree replacement if a tree gets old or sick. And these trees are all maintained by the city of Edmonton. But as you can also see from this map, there are perfect rectangles of space. And as we all know from walking around our neighborhoods, these spaces have trees in them, but we don't have the data. So this is what the project is all about gathering. So the definition is Edmonton's private urban forest. So that is what we're interested in. So these are trees on private property. So it would be the front yard, the backyard, and then in my case, the side yard, where it's all those beautiful trees, like your kid comes home from Arbor Day with the tiny sapling, and then 50 years later, you have an enormous tree in your backyard. So this is the data that we want to gather information on.
So yeah, I'm going to give a bit of background about the Tomorrow Foundation. So we're an Edmonton charity, and we were founded in 1970 as Stop, Save Tomorrow, Oppose Pollution. So we've been around for over 50 years, promoting awareness of and conducting research on environmental sustainability. We did have a bit of hiatus in the early 2000s, but in 2016, we worked with Pass for People with the support of Edmonton Community Foundation on a series of 3 projects to advocate for high quality biking and walking routes in Edmonton. And those projects resulted in the construction of the downtown bike grid and the funding and planning of the bike grid for the south side. Also in 2019, the Tomorrow Foundation partnered with the local good to bring the Green Drinks Climate Emergency Series to Edmontonians. Currently, we have a number of projects on the go, including Carbon Negative Backyard House, for which there's a webinar next week on July 14th, if you're interested. You can sign up on our website the same way as you signed up for this one. And then our air quality monitoring project, which I will talk about a bit later. And then this project, Edmonton's private urban forest. Next slide. So over the last few weeks, the board has been meeting to complete a strategic visioning process for the Tomorrow Foundation. And I felt it was important to share the results of that. They really define who the Tomorrow Foundation currently is and where our board see our path forward. It's not simply enough to say we're an environmental charity. We wanted to understand what exactly our core values, vision, and mission were. So our overall vision is Edmonton related. So we wish to see all Edmontonians empowered, connected, and engaged in building a vibrant, green, equitable city. And our mission is what specifically we will do to move towards that vision. So we believe in the power of many voices to bring about transformational change. We engage Edmontonians through projects and actions that provide them with the information, tools, and spaces needed to build connected, equitable communities, increase local environmental understanding, and promote environmental leadership at all levels. Next slide. So our core values can be thought of as the lens through which we assess the projects or initiatives that we take on before we decide to take them on. So we would hope that all of our initiatives align with these core values. So equity, community, joy and fun, humility, data and evidence, and positive action. Next slide. So I mentioned our air quality monitoring project. So currently we have one site monitoring air quality in the Queen Alexandra neighbourhood. And we have funding and volunteers sufficient to get at least one other site, hopefully two, in the same neighbourhood. But we are also installing traffic monitoring cameras at those sites. So the goal would be to have 3 sites at different different volumes of traffic, so high, low, and somewhere in between. So we're fine-tuning the technology for these open source traffic monitoring cameras, but we're planning to install the first one this weekend. And once we have the traffic monitoring and the air quality at that one site, we can make sure all the glitches are sorted out before we put in 2 more. So the tree project came out of the air quality monitoring project because we had a series of webinars last year, and we had one particular excellent presentation about trees, and I think that inspired a lot of people. And trees are definitely related to air quality. So I've been trying to work with the tree project to make sure that our air quality and traffic monitoring sites are aligned with the pilot project. So those 3 sites will be within the pilot project area. And I just wanted to talk as well. So one of our core values is equity, and one of the aspects which interests, well, this project team, but also the Tomorrow Foundation, is equity in cities. And it can be quite clearly seen in relation to trees, especially when considering their benefits in terms of cooling, air filtering, stormwater management. And so I just wanted to mention this video I came across on YouTube. It particularly resonated with me. It highlights the fact that the disparity in tree cover in cities is not random. And in some cities, it can be connected back to a racist practice called redlining, which began in the 1930s. Areas were labeled as hazardous because they had large Black populations, and this led to disinvestment, poverty, fewer trees, and a wealth gap between white and Black families. And those effects are still felt today in a lot of cities in North America. So less tree cover means less of the benefits of trees. Hotter temperatures, less flood control, and more air pollution. So those economic aspects make the wealth gap even more significant. And you may have heard of the term of energy poverty. So as a foundation and as a project team, we see the importance of planting trees in areas where they are needed, particularly in relation to social equity. And we believe that this project is an important step to identifying areas in Edmonton which need more trees. So Diana's going to talk some more about the benefits of trees and Edmonton's initiatives to plant more trees.
Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, so Sandra and Elizabeth, they've explained the background of Tomorrow Foundation and sort of the rationale for our pilot project. But I'll get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of the project. But I first wanted to just start off with kind of the larger context in which we're working in. And I'm guessing that some of you already know that the city of Edmonton and the federal government are engaging in really large tree plantings. The city is planting 2 million and the federal government is engaged in planting 2 billion. So these are really large and trees are often used as a climate strategy. I'm also guessing that some of you already know that trees sequester carbon, as Sandra has also mentioned, out of the atmosphere. And so that is why there's so much focus on trees and as a tool to help with climate change. And so these types of projects are happening kind of all over the world. It's not just in Canada. So this is a big initiative going on. Next slide, please. So now just a little bit more at the city level. So this slide I just took screenshots of the Edmonton City Plan, which is a strategic guiding document that describes how the city will grow. There are two parts of the document that are particularly interesting to us for our project. One is what I just mentioned, the large tree plantings that are going on and helping to reduce GHG emissions. But the other one is also about infill housing developments, and the plan indicates that they'd like to increase that to 50%. So this is of interest to us because housing development sites are really a place in the city where the tree inventory is actively changing. So, you know, there are new trees being planted, but also being cut down. So we're really interested in the interaction of these two growth strategies in the city plan and how they might actually be able to support each other. Next slide, please. So yeah, this slide is just about why we're excited about trees. You may or may not know, and Sandra has already talked a bit about this, but really there's just a multitude of benefits that are provided by trees. And so this slide just kind of captures some of the major benefits. And of course, there are many more that cannot be shown here, but so just kind of starting at the top, trees can capture and remove air pollutants out of the air. Next is the carbon sequestration, as we've discussed. And then third is the potential of energy savings that can come from trees shading your home. And related to that is that trees can help reduce urban heat island, where temperatures rise in the region due to the lack of vegetation to cool an area, and sometimes because of a lot of cement structures. The next one is just about how trees add aesthetic value to homes and can help increase property values. And next is about trees' ability to manage stormwater. So they're just like giant straws. They sort of suck up a lot of rainwater and can help with flood reduction or keeping the water clean in the stormwater. So and then lastly, which is always really hard to quantify, are the impacts of trees on our health and wellness. And nature just does a lot for us psychologically. And so those are also very important benefits as well. Next slide, please. So on this slide, I just thought I'd demonstrate on a heat map the changes in temperature across a landscape when there are trees present or not. So this relates to the reduction in urban heat island effects. And so on this map, red indicates warmer temperatures, peach is kind of slightly cooler, and then yellow is cooler than that. And so, as you can see, it's the Queen Alexandra neighborhood. And if anybody's familiar with the neighborhood, you'll notice that the red areas really are where there are lots of buildings and parking lots. So, this is clear that trees could be used there. So, just as an example, if there were a day that, say, it were 25 degrees outside, that's what you hear on the weather station. When you go to particular places, it could actually be warmer or cooler because of the vegetation. So this is just a map actually of an average summer day in August in 2020. So next slide, please. So I just thought I would talk a little bit about the data that we're collecting, and Elizabeth has already talked about it, but basically this is information that you're going to see on the brochure that we're going to be handing out in mailboxes hopefully this coming week. And there's basically two parts. So the first one is the actual tree data collection sheet that is on the top. And then the other is the yard map, and that's where we're asking you to sort of locate where that specific tree is on your lot. The brochure is somewhat self-explanatory. We have examples, but I just want to point out that it's important for us to be able to match the tree data, the tree number, which is kind of the first column in the top part, the top table, with where you put it on the maps, because we need to see that together. Could you go to the next slide? Thanks. So this is how we would translate the data that you send to us into the mapping software that we're using. And so this is just an example of an aerial view of a property, and the green dots indicate where the trees are located. And the location is important because it allows us to estimate the potential energy savings. Next slide, and I think I'll pass it off to Barbara now. She's going to talk about tree identification and other related project stuff.
You're muted.
Yeah, classic, right? So hello, everyone. So one piece of information that is important to us because it makes a difference in terms of benefits of trees is really what kind of tree you have on your property. And there are, first of all, two big groups of tree, and you're likely all aware of that. So we have conifer trees that have needles, and you can all think like Christmas tree there. And then we have deciduous trees that have broad leaves, and those trees usually drop their leaves in fall, at least here in Edmonton. So next slide. And there are a couple of very common conifer trees that I've seen around. And one group of those are the spruces and the firs. And you can relatively easily recognize them because their leaves are single. And what I mean by that is that if you just like walk up to a tree and pluck a needle off or two, right, you only have this one needle in your hand. Because another group of conifer trees are the pines, and pines have their needles in bundles, right? And that means that if you kind of pluck them out, they stick together in usually in twos, but sometimes in threes or four as well. And in the kind of little picture in the middle there, I have placed spruce needles and pine needles next to each other. And you hopefully see that the pine needles from this jack pine in this case are in a bundle of two, and they're stuck together at the bottom. And then there's a little brown kind of glue at the bottom of those needles that keeps them together. Whereas the spruce needles really have just its own individual little connection to the twig, right? So that kind of separates the group of the spruce and firs from the group of pines that we see in Edmonton. And another very special conifer tree is the larch, which is awesome because it's a conifer tree that drops its needles in the fall. And in Edmonton, these larches turn a brilliant yellow or gold in fall, and they look like really like torches out in the forest. Anyway, you can recognize a larch because the needles are in clusters. And hopefully you can see this here on the picture in the bottom left side of the slide. And it's not just one or two needles, but it's really a bunch of needles. Like it's a cluster, and it's sometimes 15, sometimes 23. And so it's not a pattern. And those needles are really a little lighter in color, and those needles are soft, right? So it's not a prickly conifer tree, but it's actually very nice to touch, and it has those soft, nicely cool needles. Anyway, those are some of the conifer trees you see, and hopefully by with the materials that we provide as handouts and provide on the website, you will be able to figure out what kind of pine and what kind of spruce or fir you might have on your property. Next slide. And then there are those deciduous trees, right? And many of the boulevard trees belong into this group, and you might recognize those leaves that are shown here. So Edmonton has quite a lot of elm trees as boulevard trees, and we have an elm tree in our front yard as well. So that would be the single leaf on the left-hand side. And all these trees we call simple leaves, because what you see is the leaf. It has one blade, and it has this one stalk, this one petiole. And in Edmonton, in the past years, we've seen an increase in linden trees that has this really nice heart shape. And the river valley is full of balsam poplars and aspen trees. And you can see those leaves more on the right-hand side. And in front yards and backyards, you can see more of a specific aspen or poplar. It's a kind of hybrid columnar aspen or poplar, it's called, that would have leaves very similar to those on the right-hand side. So next slide, please. Well, if there's like simple leaves, right, there's likely that there's something else like complex leaf. And these are trees or leaves that we call compound leaves. So those leaves are a little more complex, not quite as easy to figure out, as you can see on these pictures, because each picture shows one leaf, even though it looks like there's many leaves on this. But this is really an example of trees that have this one stalk, and then the blade of the leaf is divided into many smaller leaflets, right? So this is when we're talking about trees with compound leaves, and there are some very common one in Edmonton as well. So on the left-hand side, you can see a leaf of a green ash. So you can see that it has 4 pairs of leaflet and 1 leaflet at the end. So making this a total of 9 leaflets. And again, this is one leaf. The mountain ash, which is the middle picture, right, has this similar kind of leaf, only that the leaves are usually, the leaf is more narrow and it has more leaflets. So mountain ashes have usually 4 to 7 pairs of leaflet and a terminal leaflet as well that kind of make up the whole leaf. And again, if you have an ash or a mountain ash in your front or backyard, you probably can figure this out, because the mountain ashes are the ones that have the bright red berries all through winter, and the birds come and eat the berries and distribute the seeds all over your yard and stairs and your cars. And on the right-hand side is a leaf of a Manitoba maple, again, which is a very common tree. And it is kind of a little less regular than the leaves of the other 2 trees here, right? But it's a compound leaf as well. And its terminal leaflet, again, looks a little bit like a maple leaf from the flag. Or if you kind of push all of those leaflets together, you can see that it's a little kind of maple leaf outline. Again, this is just because the one blade of the leaf is divided all the way down to the middle vein, right? And those are just some of the very common trees that you would see like around Edmonton. And we've decided not to include the fruit trees into our brochure or our identification support material, because we assume that if you have an apple or a crab apple or something like this, or Evans cherry in your yard, you know that because you harvest or have to deal with the fruit in fall, right? So again, that is kind of more self-explanatory. So next slide. So once we have the data, either because you have shared it with us and helped us gather the data, or because we came and visited you and measured your trees, we can provide you with a report. This shows what ecosystem services or what benefits the tree give you or give to your property. And that would, for example, be how much air pollution has the tree removed from the air around your house this year or up to now and potentially in the future. How much energy and heating and cooling have your trees on the property saved you and can save you in the future? And again, how much carbon have those trees already pulled out of the air and put into their trunks and branches and roots? And how much stormwater will the tree hold back so that it doesn't run into basements and down the street and floods our ravine systems? So the reports that we are hoping to provide our participants with is that an illustration of the benefits of this year, which I think will be really interesting considering the heat wave we just went through. The benefits of the tree up to date, again, estimating how long or how old the tree is and how many benefits this tree can provide in the future. And again, that can be from now until 5, 10, or 25 years. And again, we will use that data and some modeling application to provide participants with a report of their trees. And with this said, I'll hand it back to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Barb. So this summer, we need you. We need you to help us identify and measure trees using the materials provided, as well as submit your data. And we need you to grant access to your property so we could come and identify and measure your trees. In return, we will give you a report of the benefits your trees are providing, as well as you have the option to get a free sampling in case you don't have enough trees in your yard. So this part is where we will be asking questions. And Conrad, if you could stop recording now, that would be great.